You spend a good part of your time speaking at homeschool conventions, and many of those conventions are put on by state organizations. And most states have their own state homeschool organization. I would love for you to talk about the importance of state organizations. Why do they exist, and why are they important to homeschooling?
Well, first of all, state organizations do more than just homeschool conferences, and I think that's what people need to understand. A state organization isn't there to just host a conference. They are there to protect your right to homeschool. I think this is probably the most important role that a state organization will ever have, is to make sure that your fundamental right, your freedom to be able to homeschool your children is being defended against, and not defended against, is being advocated for and defended. And so when parents go to a homeschool conference, I always tell them, join your state organization. For goodness sake, even if they don't have a conference, join your state organization, because these people are working 365 days a year to make sure that you have the ability to homeschool, and they're bringing you the resources to do it.
Most states have their very own state organization that knows the different battles that are being fought in their specific state. So those are the organizations that homeschoolers can go to, and they can get involved, and they can know how to get onto the battlefield with these organizations and work alongside them to strengthen the homeschool community.
Yeah, that's right. And if you're curious about where your state organization is, it's pretty easy to find. I mean, get onto a search engine and just type in your state and homeschooling. And usually the first thing that will happen is that state organization will come to the top.
We've spent some time in Virginia interviewing some of the staff from HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And I know that they work very closely with many state organizations and other leaders around the country as well to make sure that homeschooling continues to be free, because it hasn't always been a freedom that we have been able to enjoy as Americans. I think oftentimes we take it for granted, those of us who are homeschooling today, because we don't know, we were not on those front lines. We don't know the battles that were fought for years and years and years in order to make homeschooling free. And now, praise the Lord, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states, which is amazing, but we still need to continue to fight for that freedom and to keep that freedom that we have.
Yeah, well, I think something parents don't understand is that homeschool freedom, we do have it, but it is always under attack. There are a lot of people in this country and even around the world that homeschooling threatens, the existence of homeschooling threatens their ideology. So if you believe in collectivism, if you believe in socialism, you are probably not going to believe in homeschooling. And there are people who would like to see it made illegal. And so I love the work of HSLDA. We have been friends with Mike Ferris and Mike Smith for many years. The HSLDA website is a great place to go just for information. So if you want to find out what the law is in your state, really, you could go to hslda.org and just type in your state, and they will give you the law of your state. So you can find out what, because they're different. So homeschooling law varies from state to state, but it's very important for parents not to take for granted the fact that homeschooling is legal and to stay vigilant. If you think for 1 minute that homeschooling is not under attack, or that there are people in the United States that would like to see it made illegal, then you don't understand the nature of education. Education is not neutral, and people on the front lines know that. So I've seen homeschooling change quite a bit in the last 10 years. One of the things I have observed is that homeschoolers are no longer running to something, they're running from something. But the other thing that I'm observing is that I think we have forgotten what made homeschooling so successful in the first place. And I often try to tell parents, let's take a look back at the homeschool pioneers. These are the men and women who saw that education was important, that it is not neutral, that it is the job of the parents to author and direct the education and the upbringing of their children. And a lot of these parents who, without access to mainstream curriculum, in many places it was illegal, and they pulled their kids out of public school and they began to do the work of homeschooling their children. And all they had was a library card and the Lord. And guess what? Those kids are doing amazing right now. These kids are doctors and lawyers and parents themselves and teachers and judges and educators in many spheres of influence. And I'm always telling parents, it's very easy for us to become a hostage to the world's idea of what education looks like, even as we're homeschooling, and to begin to think that, oh my goodness, if I didn't have this or I didn't have that, I couldn't do it. And the homeschool pioneers knew otherwise. They knew that if they would be obedient to the Lord and they would take over the education of their children, that God would finish in their children what He began in them through Him. And it is such a powerful testimony. If you ever want to be really encouraged, talk to a homeschool pioneer. Something we can really learn from the homeschool pioneers as opposed to what we're doing today. We're really trying hard to model our homeschooling and model our education after the public school. And we see this in the push towards charter schools, right? So parents pull their kids out of public school and they think, I can't do this. I'm not equipped. And so what's the next best thing? Oh, I'll put them in a charter school. Problem with the charter school is they're getting the same information that they would be getting if they put their kid in a straight up brick and mortar school. And so I think we need to remember not only what the homeschool pioneers did that was so excellent, but what made it excellent. It was excellent because they went after the education themselves and they realized that they could do it. I think so much of what's happening with parents right now is we are having sort of a crisis of identity, right? And we've forgotten that we are the parents of these children and that we can go after that information ourselves. We don't need a charter school to help us. We don't need an online academy. So often, I had a mom ask me just the other day on my podcast, she said, I have decided to pull my kids out of public school. And I was like, great, good call. And I'm enrolling them in an online school. And the next question, she said, is, should I be concerned about what my child is learning? And my answer was an unequivocal yes. You need to know what your children are learning. So if you decide to enroll your child in any sort of system of education that takes you, again, out of the driver's seat, you need to know what your children are learning. So research it, find out about the curriculum, find out where it's coming from. You'd be amazed at what they're putting into online curriculum and into charter schools. Parents need to be the primary educators of their children, and that means that we know what our children are being taught. I think one of the reasons that parents get frustrated when they begin homeschooling is they're trying to recreate school at home. So I did this as a new homeschool mom, right? We do what we were taught. I learned in a classroom, in a traditional classroom. And so when we made the decision to pull our kids out of school, I tried as hard as I could to recreate the classroom in my home. And so to my husband's absolute delight, I took all of the chairs out of our family room downstairs. I put a flag up. I put a table. My desk was out there. I got some desks that look very similar to the desks I had in school, right? These were the ones where the janitor would come in at least once a year and he would adjust your seat up because you're growing. I found a couple of them at a garage sale. Funny thing, a homeschool mom was selling those desks. And I couldn't understand why she would do that. So I happily bought those desks and I set them up in my classroom downstairs. And we had a whiteboard and I put the posters on the wall and the whole thing. Well, where do you think we spent our time? It wasn't in that classroom that I set up. It was at the kitchen table. It was on the sofa in our family room, because real learning doesn't happen in an artificial environment. Real learning happens when we're sitting at the kitchen table. Real learning happens when we're on the couch reading about a hermit crab named Pagoo and studying the stories of men and women who followed God with a reckless abandon. And after about 6 months, my husband came to me and he said, "Hey, Heidi, I noticed that you've turned our family room into a schoolroom, but you're never down there. Do you mind if we turn it back into a family room again?" And by this time, I knew it wasn't going to work. So I said, no, that's fine. And our neighborhood garage sale was coming up. And so my sweet man, he carried those heavy, bulky desks up our stairs and out into the garage. And in about, I started pricing everything in my garage. And he came out to the garage one day and he said, "You're not going to sell those desks to a homeschool mom, are you?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I am. She'll figure it out, right?" Aren't you glad you don't live in my cul-de-sac? But the thing is, I learned a valuable lesson, and that is homeschooling is not meant to just be school at home. It's a lifestyle of learning. It's bringing our children. Yes, we're doing book work. Yes, we're studying workbook. Yes, we're studying science, but it's so much more than that. It's relationship. It's sitting around on the couch and reading these wonderful, rich stories and talking about why learning is so important. That's what makes homeschooling different. Don't try to recreate school at home. Enjoy your children in the home God gave you and watch education happen.